Hello, everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. The cruelest thing my wife ever did was lock me out of the townhouse we bought together, stand behind the glass with her family packed in the living room like a jury, and say, "You have 1 hour to get your things. You're not sleeping here again." Her mother smiled like it was a graduation. Her brother filmed me like a punchline. My wife, Tiana Brooks, didn't blink. I remember my hand shaking on the doorknob, the cold air in Largo, Maryland, and the way my own home suddenly felt like somebody else's property. Here's how it happened. I'm Micah Reed, 36 at the time, born in Baltimore, working facilities management for a medical office network in Arlington, Virginia. I wasn't flashy. I was consistent. I was the kind of man who set alarms, paid bills early, and kept receipts because peace mattered to me. When I met Tiana at a friend's cookout in Prince George's County, she had that steady confidence that made people lean in. She laughed with her whole face. She told me she wanted stability, a home, a family that looked like safety. I believed her because I wanted those things too. The first year of marriage was normal in a way that felt rare. Sunday grocery runs, weeknight dinners, a small savings plan that actually grew. Tiana worked HR for a logistics company near Hyattsville, and she was good at reading people. She could calm a room. She could also cut someone down without raising her voice, but I didn't see that part early. If we argued, it ended with compromise. If I made a mistake, I apologized. If she did, she'd say, "I hear you," and we would move on. I thought we were learning each other like adults. Then her family started showing up more. Not because of emergencies, because of opinion. Her mother, Loretta Brooks, lived in Bowie and treated advice like a right. Her aunt Denise Carter acted like she had a seat at every decision. Her younger brother, Malik, floated between jobs and always had time to check on his sister. They were black like me, raised in the same region, but they moved like a unit. I was the husband, yet somehow I was always being evaluated like I was applying for permanent access to my own life. When we decided to buy a home, that evaluation turned into control. We toured townhouses in Upper Marlboro and Largo, and every time Tiana liked something, Loretta had a reason it was wrong. Too close to the highway. Too far from us. Too small for what you deserve. It was never for what you both deserve. I watched that language shift and tried to ignore it. Tiana would squeeze my hand in the car and say, "She means well." Then she would repeat her mother's criticisms like they were her own ideas. Loretta offered what sounded like help, a $25,000 family gift for the down payment. I didn't ask for it. I was prepared to wait another year and keep saving. But Tiana's eyes lit up at the number, and Loretta knew it. "This is for my daughter," Loretta said, like I wasn't sitting there. "I want her secure." I heard the warning inside the generosity. Still, I told myself money was money, and we could be grateful without giving up our dignity. I didn't realize Loretta didn't give money. She purchased leverage. The leverage came with paperwork. Loretta insisted we meet with the family attorney in Washington, D.C., a man who shook my hand like he was testing my grip. He slid documents across a polished table and called it standard protection. It wasn't a prenup exactly. It was a marital property agreement tied to the down payment funds. Loan versus gift language, reimbursement schedules, and clauses about interference. The attorney said it was to avoid misunderstandings. Tiana nodded along like she already agreed. I asked for time to review. Loretta's smile tightened. I hired my own lawyer to review it, Renee Whitaker in Silver Spring, because pride is expensive, but ignorance is worse. Renee told me the agreement was aggressive, but not impossible. The down payment could be treated as a loan to Tiana's separate property, but the clause about third-party interference was unusual. It said if any third party contributed to or coordinated an unlawful removal of a spouse from the marital home, those parties could be held jointly liable for costs. Renee said, "It's a scare clause, but if they sign as parties, it can matter." I asked why Loretta would want that. Renee said, "Control cuts both ways if you let it." In the end, I signed because I believed in my marriage and because the agreement protected me too if I was smart. Renee negotiated revisions. If we divorced, whoever kept the townhouse would refinance, and we'd reimburse documented separate contributions first. It was clean, fair on paper. Loretta wanted her name on everything, so she signed too, along with Denise and Malik as acknowledging parties. They acted like it was normal. Tiana told me not to make it weird. I remember walking out into the DC sunlight, feeling like I'd swallowed something sharp and called it trust. We moved into the Largo townhouse that summer. I painted the living room myself. I replaced a shaky railing. I installed a smart lock and cameras because we traveled sometimes and security mattered. Tiana posted pictures like we'd won. Her family came over every weekend at first, and I tried to be welcoming. I grilled chicken. I offered drinks. I listened to Loretta talk about what a real man does like it was a lecture series. Malik would roam my house with a casual entitlement, opening cabinets, checking the garage. If I looked annoyed, Tiana would accuse me of being uptight. The first real crack came over something small, a missing envelope. I kept a folder in the office with closing documents, receipts, and bank statements. One day it was moved. I asked Tiana if she'd been in the office. She said no too quickly. Later that week, Loretta referenced a detail from the mortgage that I hadn't discussed. I felt my stomach drop. I didn't accuse anyone. I asked for boundaries. Tiana stared at me like I'd insulted her mother. My family isn't stealing from you, she said. The way she said you instead of us stayed with me. Tiana started talking about money differently after that. My paycheck wasn't what we earned. It was what you bring in. Her bonus wasn't extra. It was my money. It wasn't dramatic at first, just little sentences that moved the relationship like furniture, slowly, until you realize the room is not arranged for you anymore. If I asked about budgeting, she'd sigh like I was annoying. If I suggested we meet with a financial planner, Loretta would call it control. Tiana repeated that word, control, like she needed it to be true, so she wouldn't have to admit she was being led. Around the same time, her family began treating me like I was temporary. Malik would joke, "Micah better behave, or we taking this place back." Denise would laugh and add, "Don't worry, baby, you know your mama won't let you lose." Loretta would look me up and down and say, "A woman has to protect herself." I wanted to ask what danger they thought I was. I wanted to ask why protection always meant pushing me down. But I grew up watching black men get punished for having emotions in the wrong room. So I swallowed it, thinking consistency would outlast their noise. It didn't. One Friday, I came home and found Loretta in our kitchen without Tiana there. She was reorganizing cabinets. I said politely, "Ms. Brooks, what's going on?" She didn't stop moving. "Tiana said you don't know how to set up a home," she replied. My chest tightened. I told her we were fine. She finally turned and said, "You're fine until you're not." Then she smiled like she'd delivered wisdom. That night, I told Tiana I didn't want her mother there when she wasn't home. Tiana stared at me and said, "So you're trying to isolate me." The word isolate became her favorite weapon. If I asked for privacy, I was isolating. If I asked for respect, I was isolating. If I asked her to stop discussing our finances with Loretta, I was isolating. It was like my boundaries were proof of guilt. Meanwhile, Tiana started sharing more and more with them. I'd walk into a room and the conversation would stop. I'd hear my name said in a tone that was not love. I'd check our joint account and see transfers labeled family with no discussion. When I asked, she'd say, "It's handled." The cruelest part of slow betrayal is the way it makes you question your own instincts. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that I was being sensitive. That marriage required patience. I didn't want to be the husband who calls everything disrespect. But then the disrespect got practical. One morning, I tried to use the joint card at a gas station in Capitol Heights, and it declined. I called Tiana. She didn't answer. I texted. No response. I drove to work on fumes, embarrassed and angry, and later that day, she texted, "We need to talk about spending." Like I was a child she needed to correct. I started keeping my own records quietly. Not because I wanted revenge, because I could feel the floor shifting. Renee had once told me, when people change the story, documents keep the truth. I took screenshots of account changes, receipts for repairs, mortgage payments, and the dates I was the one paying when Tiana forgot. I saved texts where she threatened to make a move. I never confronted her with the evidence. I didn't want drama. I wanted an exit plan, if she decided to break the marriage in a way that left me bleeding. The moment I realized she was capable of cruelty without remorse came at a family gathering in Bowie. Loretta hosted dinner, and everyone sat around laughing. Denise asked me, in front of everyone, "So, Micah, you got any assets that ain't tied to Tiana?" The question was too pointed to be a joke. Malik laughed loudest. I looked at Tiana, waiting for her to shut it down. She sipped her drink and said, "He's private. Not protective, dismissive." Loretta leaned back and said, "Private is fine until it's hiding." Then she smiled at Tiana like they shared a secret. 2 weeks after that dinner, Tiana told me she wanted a divorce like she was ordering food. No tears, no shaking hands, just a calm announcement on a Tuesday night while I was putting leftovers away. "I'm not happy," she said. "I feel like I outgrew this." I asked what changed. She shrugged. I asked if there was someone else. She smirked, not guilty, not sad, just irritated I'd ask. "I don't owe you that," she said. I tried to keep my voice steady. "We're married. We owe each other honesty." She replied, "That's your belief." The next part happened fast because her family was already in motion. Loretta came over the following evening with Malik and Denise like they were a task force. Tiana sat on the couch while Loretta did the talking. "We're not doing the back and forth," Loretta said. "This marriage is done. Micah can go stay with somebody." I said, "This is my home too." Malik stood up and walked to the smart lock panel like he was testing it. Tiana looked at me with cold eyes. "You're not going to make this hard," she said. "Pack your things." I refused at first, calmly, because I couldn't believe the audacity. I reminded her my name was on the mortgage. I reminded her we bought this together. I told Loretta she had no authority in my house. Loretta laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Authority is who the room belongs to." Malik pulled out his phone. Denise folded her arms. And Tiana, my wife, said, "If you raise your voice, I'm calling the police and saying you're threatening me." It wasn't a threat wrapped in emotion. It was a strategy delivered in a flat tone. I felt my blood run cold. That's how they forced me out. Not with physical violence. Worse. With the promise of a story that would ruin me. I pictured officers, handcuffs, neighbors watching. I picture my job hearing domestic incident and quietly replacing me. I picture my name becoming a warning. So I did what they counted on. I stayed calm. I walked upstairs and threw clothes into a duffel bag with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I grabbed my work boots, my laptop, and the folder of documents I'd hidden behind old manuals. When I came downstairs, Loretta clapped once like a judge ending court. At the door, Tiana stepped close enough for me to smell her perfume, the same one she wore on our honeymoon in Miami. She whispered, "You're going to regret wasting my time." Then, louder, so everyone could hear, she said, "Leave your key." I placed my key on the entry table. Malik held the door open like he was escorting me out of a building I didn't belong in. Denise watched with a satisfied expression. Loretta said, "Good. Now we can breathe." Tiana didn't look away. She didn't soften. That's the moment I understood. She wasn't confused. She was committed. I sat in my car that night in a parking lot in Bowie because my pride couldn't handle calling friends at midnight to admit I'd been thrown out of my own home. The cold crept in my bones. I kept replaying the scene, trying to find the part where love might have existed. My phone buzzed with a single text from Tiana, "Don't come back without an appointment." Then an email from a law office with a subject line that made my stomach twist, "Dissolution documents." It felt like she'd already practiced living without me. I stared at the townhouse address in the signature block like it was a place I'd imagined. The next morning, I showered at a gym in Lanham and went to work pretending I wasn't falling apart. I smiled at coworkers. I fixed an air handler. I answered emails. I was operating on pure muscle memory. At lunch, I sat in my car and finally called Renee Whitaker. I told her everything. She didn't gasp. She didn't dramatize. She just said, "Okay, now we get organized." I asked her if I should go back to the house. She said, "Not without legal guidance. They're trying to bait you into being the villain." Then she said, "Do you still have the property agreement?" I did. Renee told me to document the lockout and the threats. I sent her screenshots of Tiana's texts. I gave her the camera logs that showed Malik entering the home after I left and the smart lock code changing. I handed over bank statements showing transfers to Loretta and payments for Tiana's attorney. They're not just supporting her, Renee said. They're participating. She explained that if we moved carefully, we could force the truth into the open without a public scene. She asked where I was staying. I admitted I'd slept in my car. Her voice softened only slightly. Get a hotel. Keep your receipts. Everything matters now. I checked into a modest hotel in Greenbelt and slept like a man who'd been holding his breath for months. When I woke up, I had a voicemail from my supervisor asking if I was okay. Apparently, I'd seemed off. I told him I had a personal situation, nothing that would affect my work. I was proud of how steady I sounded. Inside, I was cracked open. In the mirror, I looked older. I kept thinking about the townhouse, my paint on the walls, my tools in the garage, my things behind a lock I helped pay for. Every time I pictured Tiana's face, I felt the same numb shock, no remorse. The divorce papers were aggressive. Tiana wanted the house, spousal support, and reimbursement for emotional labor like it was a line item. Loretta had clearly helped write the narrative. I was controlling, financially reckless, emotionally unavailable. It was almost impressive how cleanly they erased my reality. Renee and I met in her office in Silver Spring, and she said, they want to fight because they think you'll get loud. We're not giving them that. She suggested a different approach, a settlement offer that looked generous enough to tempt them into signing quickly, before they had time to read the parts that protected me. I didn't love the idea of giving anything to people who'd humiliated me, but Renee explained the strategy like a surgeon. If they want a public war, they're confident, she said. Confidence makes people careless. We can use that. The settlement would include the townhouse going to me, but framed as me taking the debt, while Tiana kept certain accounts. More importantly, it would activate the reimbursement schedule from our earlier agreement and add enforcement language tied to documented third-party assistance. They already signed that old agreement, Renee said, and they're still paying her lawyer. Let them keep doing it. For weeks, I lived between work and the hotel, carrying myself like I wasn't ashamed. On weekends, I sat in my car outside the townhouse sometimes, just to look at the windows. I never tried to enter. I didn't want police. I didn't want a scene. I watched Malik come and go. I watched Loretta's car parked like she owned the place. It did something to my chest, this deep, humiliating ache. I'd been a husband. Now I was a stranger in my own neighborhood. When I told Tiana I needed to retrieve tools from the garage for work, she replied, buy new ones. That was when the suffering stopped being only emotional and became practical. Replacing tools cost money. Living in a hotel cost money. Paying my share of a mortgage for a home I couldn't enter cost money. It felt like I was being charged for the privilege of being erased. Renee instructed me not to stop paying the mortgage because it could hurt me later. So I paid. I kept records. I stored receipts in neat folders because rage without structure is useless. Sometimes late at night, I would sit on the edge of the hotel bed and feel the weight of loneliness press down until my hands went numb. I never posted about it. I never told the internet. I just endured. Tiana never asked how I was doing. She never asked where I was sleeping. She communicated through short, cold messages like I was a nuisance. Once she texted, stop emailing. You're harassing me. I hadn't emailed her in days. I realized she was building a file on me. Loretta wanted a narrative that justified the cruelty. Malik wanted drama. Denise wanted entertainment. And Tiana, my wife, wanted to win. The lack of remorse wasn't accidental. It was the whole design. They wanted me to feel powerless. They wanted me to beg. They wanted me to break. Then Renee sent the settlement offer to Tiana's attorney. Within 24 hours, Loretta called me for the first time in months. Micah, she said, too sweet. I hear you're willing to be reasonable. I didn't respond. She continued, Tiana deserves peace. Don't drag this out. I said, calmly, tell your daughter to stop locking me out of my property. Loretta's tone sharpened. You sound bitter, she snapped. Remember who helped you get that house? I almost laughed at the audacity. I remember, I said. That's why I have every document. Then I hung up. A week later, Tiana agreed to meet for final terms in a conference room near downtown D.C. Her attorney's email sounded confident, almost cheerful. When I arrived, I saw Loretta, Denise, and Malik with Tiana dressed like they were attending a celebration. Loretta had on a bright scarf. Denise carried a designer bag. Malik leaned back in his chair with that smug expression men wear when they think the room will embarrass you. Tiana sat straight, hands folded, eyes cold. No sadness, no reflection, just a quiet certainty that she and her family were about to watch me lose. Before we sat, Renee whispered, "Let them talk. The more they talk, the more careless they get." Loretta didn't disappoint. "We're glad you finally accepted reality," she said, loud enough for everyone. Denise smiled and added, "A man who knows when he's finished is a man with sense." Malik chuckled. Tiana stared at me like I was a stranger who owed her money. Her attorney slid the final packet across the table. "This will be quick," he said. "We just need signatures." Loretta's eyes shined like she was watching a door close behind me. Renee asked for a moment to review the packet, even though she prepared it. That pause mattered. It made them impatient. Loretta tapped her fingers. Malik sighed dramatically. Denise whispered to Tiana, and they smirked. Tiana's attorney said, "We're all adults here." Renee nodded politely. "Exactly," she said. Then she opened to a tab and pushed a page forward. "Before we sign," Renee said, "let's confirm this clause is understood by all parties." Tiana's attorney frowned slightly. Loretta leaned forward, irritated. "What clause?" she demanded. Renee pointed. "Section 9, she said. Third-party assistance and interference." Tiana's attorney began reading aloud, his voice slowing as comprehension caught up. The clause defined marital assistance from non-parties, legal fees, mortgage contributions, cohabitation support, and triggered reimbursement from separate property if the initiating party accepted that assistance while pushing for dissolution. Loretta's face tightened. Denise's eyes narrowed. Malik sat up straighter. Tiana's expression didn't change. She looked annoyed, like paperwork was being dramatic. Then the attorney reached the line. Interfering parties who sign below acknowledge joint liability for costs associated with unlawful removal from the marital home. His voice went quieter. He turned the page. There were signatures, not just mine and Tiana's, Loretta's, Denise's, Malik's. The room went still in a way that felt physical. Loretta's mouth opened and closed without sound. Denise leaned forward, blinking fast. Malik said, "Hold up," and pushed his chair back like distance could erase ink. Tiana stared at the signatures, then at her family, irritation finally cracking into anger. "Why are your names on that?" she snapped at them. Loretta looked panicked, but not remorseful. "We didn't sign for that," Loretta said, voice rising. Renee didn't argue. She just slid forward exhibits. Zelle transfers from Loretta to Tiana labeled attorney, a cashier's check image, mortgage payments made by Loretta after my lockout, and messages where Malik coordinated changing the lock code. Tiana's attorney rubbed his forehead like he was trying to prevent a headache. "These payments," he said carefully, "are going to be an issue under the terms." Denise whispered, "This is ridiculous," but her voice shook. Malik muttered, "This ain't what we meant." Loretta leaned toward Renee and said, "You tricked us." Renee's tone stayed calm. "No one forced you to sign," she replied. "You wanted involvement. You wanted control. You got legal involvement." Tiana's eyes flashed. "So you planned this," she hissed at me. I met her gaze. "You planned my humiliation," I said quietly. "I planned my protection." Then came the second silence, the one that hit when they reached the property disposition schedule. It listed reimbursement priority, documented mortgage payments, repairs, and out-of-pocket costs I carried while locked out would be reimbursed first, and the townhouse would be awarded to me contingent on refinance within 60 days. If Tiana obstructed, the property would be sold with distribution per schedule. Tiana's attorney read it twice. Loretta stared like the page was offensive. Denise's face hardened into pure anger. Malik looked like someone realizing the joke was on him. Tiana didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just looked at me with a cold rage that said she would rather burn down a house than admit she was wrong. Loretta finally snapped, loud and sharp. "This is not happening. That house is for my daughter." Renee didn't raise her voice. "It's a mortgage," she said, "not a prayer." Malik started pacing. Denise kept repeating, "This is sick. as if indignation could rewrite legal language. Tiana's attorney asked for a recess to review implications. Renee agreed. We sat quietly while the Brooks family huddled in a corner whispering like conspirators whose plan hit a wall. I watched Tiana's face. She wasn't heartbroken. She was furious that I wasn't destroyed. She wanted me to leave that room smaller than I entered. Instead, she was shrinking. When they returned, the attorney's tone had changed. Given these provisions, he said, we'll need to advise our clients carefully. Loretta barked, advise us to fight it. Denise nodded aggressively. Malik said, we not paying nothing. Renee simply pointed to the signature block again. You don't have to want it, she said. You signed it. Loretta's eyes darted toward me with pure hatred. You think you won, she spat. I didn't respond. Winning wasn't the point. Surviving was. I'd lived through the humiliation of being thrown out like trash. This was just the paperwork catching up to their cruelty. The final agreement still got signed, because once attorneys start explaining risk, pride becomes expensive. Tiana signed with a tight jaw, no tremble, no remorse. Loretta signed too, glaring at the page like it was an enemy. Denise signed with shaking hands but hardened eyes. Malik tried to refuse until the attorney told him refusal would only make enforcement uglier. Malik signed, then immediately looked at me like he wanted violence. I just sat there steady. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I didn't speak. The satisfaction wasn't joy. It was relief, like finally stepping out of a room filled with smoke. Enforcement came quietly. A court order formalized the refinance timeline and the reimbursement schedule. The sheriff didn't have to escort me because Renee sent notices that made obstruction feel pointless. Still, the day I returned to the townhouse in Largo, my hands shook as I inserted my new key. The air inside smelled like perfume and somebody else's comfort. Furniture had been moved. Cabinets were reorganized. My tools were gone. Some of my clothes were missing. Tiana had treated my absence like an opportunity to rewrite history. I walked room to room, documenting what was missing with photos, not because I wanted petty revenge, but because I refused to be gaslit again. Tiana stayed long enough to pack, while glaring at me like I was the intruder. Loretta and Denise helped, moving boxes with stiff, angry movements. Malik carried items out and slammed the door too hard each trip. Nobody apologized for locking me out. Nobody admitted wrongdoing. Tiana walked past me at one point and said, "Enjoy your empty house." I looked at her and felt something unexpected. Not love, not hate, distance. "I will," I said quietly. That made her eyes flash with fresh anger. She wanted pain. I gave her calm. Her family wanted a celebration. The only thing they got was silence. The financial consequences landed where it hurt them most, privately. Loretta had to reimburse documented payments and legal contributions under the agreement. Denise had to contribute too. Malik's involvement in the lock change and his signed acknowledgement made him liable for certain costs. They raged, but rage doesn't pay judgments. They stopped posting photos of brunch and family gatherings for a while. Their tone changed when they spoke about the divorce. Less triumphant, more bitter, like a plan that backfired. Tiana moved back to Bowie with Loretta. Not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't afford the lifestyle she tried to keep while spending money like victory was guaranteed. She blamed me, loudly. She never blamed herself. I rebuilt in quiet ways. I didn't throw a party. I didn't tell co-workers the details. I moved back into the townhouse and replaced what was missing. I repaired the places where Malik had damaged things out of spite. I changed every code and lock and password. I sat alone on the living room floor one night with the lights off and let the grief come without fighting it. Not for Tiana, grief for the life I thought I had, for the version of marriage I believed was possible. Then I got up, washed my face, and went to sleep because survival sometimes looks like routine. Within months, my life started to steady. I requested a transfer to a better role in Arlington. More responsibility, higher pay. I didn't announce it. I just did it. I refinanced the townhouse on schedule and removed Tiana's name. The day the refinance finalized, I sat in my car afterward, hands on the steering wheel, breathing like I'd been holding my breath for a year. No applause. No speech, just a quiet release. I bought new furniture slowly, choosing pieces that felt like my taste, not a compromise built on fear. I cooked again. I invited one close friend over and didn't explain everything, just enough. Tiana never softened. She sent a few messages that were not apologies, just blame dressed up as closure. You didn't have to do all that, she wrote once, as if her actions were minor and my response was the crime. Loretta sent nothing except a demand through an attorney that tried to reopen terms. It failed. Denise told mutual acquaintances I had tricked them, as if reading was optional. Malik posted vague statements about betrayal and snakes, but he never said my name because the paper trail didn't allow lies to breathe. Their karma wasn't public humiliation. It was something worse for people like them. Consequences without an audience to perform for. A year later, I sat on my back patio in Largo early on a Sunday morning, coffee in hand, listening to the quiet. I wasn't famous. I wasn't giving advice online. I wasn't leading a group or making a brand out of my pain. I was simply a man who got his life back in the most private way possible, by refusing to become what they wanted me to be. They cheered the divorce because they thought it would erase me. Instead, it taught me exactly who I was without them: steady, strategic, and free. The house felt like mine again, not because I won it, but because I survived what they did and still chose peace. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.